Day 29. So this is essentially my last content day, and they suggest teaching something. So I was kind of racking my brain what I could teach, and I've mentioned Braille several times and whatnot, and I thought I would do a little teaching and some show and tell. Um, Most people haven't seen this stuff, and I don't hear a whole lot of talk about it. When I look it up, it's usually very superficial. And I want to talk about it in a little more detail. So, Braille. Braille has a very interesting history, and I won't bore you with it trying to recall it and getting probably a lot of it wrong. Um, excuse me. But suffice it to say, uh, Louis Braille is the guy who's recognized as the creator of the system that we generally know as Braille today. Um, and it's actually a pretty simple system when you uh, strip away all the different languages and whatnot. If you just look at it as a physical representation, it is a best way to think of it. If you were to go and get a muffin pan that has 6 little slots in it, three on each side, and you take that narrow end and put it towards your belly, and you look down at it, that's a Braille cell. It is 2 columns of 3 rows. So try to demonstrate. Here we got 2 columns, and we got a top row, a middle row, and a bottom row. And that makes 6 dots in total. Now there are a few numbering systems out there to give those dots a name. But what is usually most accepted, in my opinion, I've seen difference, when you get out of the US and English countries, this definitely happens where they've had to learn how to teach it themselves. They just saw they saw a Braille sound and they said, okay, let's make our own thing and teach it. And they don't have any prior art other than that. But getting back to labeling, so if you think about left and right, we got a left column and a right column, and hopefully that is showing up the same way with you. I'm not sure. Um, but the left upper corner, that's dot 1, and we go down the column. So dot 2 is in that first column, row 2. And then first column, row 3 is dot 3. And then we go back up to column 2, row 1, and that's dot 4. 5 is row 2 in the second column, and row 3 in the second column is dot 6. So there are 6 dots. Well, that makes for a grand total of 64 unique symbols if you include no dots at all. And that is the Braille space. So it's a very simple system, and our goal is to assign meanings to all those dots, all those permutations. And we only got 63 to use, right? We got to have a space somewhere. So 64 down to 63. We got 63 things that we can assign something to. Well, I mean, that sort of fit our alphabet here in England or English. Um, but you think about it, right? We got 26 letters. Now what about capitals and punctuation and oh, numbers? Yeah, numbers. Yeah, that'd be nice. Oh, well, you can see we run out of symbols very fast. Um, so a coding system was invented, and uh, Louis Braille, he's the one who put the first one out that was organized, and it was French based. So the English Braille actually has an odd exception in it because I'm not sure if it's still true, but back then they didn't have a W in their alphabet any way, shape, or form, or it was so rarely used that he didn't think it was worthwhile. So the first 20 what in our alphabet, all of them but the W follow a very regular pattern. And so he divided our alphabet up into lines of 10. You know, hey, we got 10 fingers. Maybe that's what it was about. I don't know, but that's my guess. And he had a few starts on there, I understand, where he played around with different uh, dot combinations. But with a, with I understanding that he met somebody in the military who was working on something very similar, not the same quite representation, but the same coding idea he needed, and they call it night writing. And it was a series of dots that the military would use to encode messages that can be read at night by the soldiers. So Braille is not just for the blind. We like it a lot because it is one of our few alternatives. But there's a lot of other uses outside of this specialty. It is a non-visual way of communication. So think about that for a while. There are contexts where you need non-visual, and that would be kind of awesome to have something in your feathers. So I am going to talk about, I guess, the first 10 letters. Now I'm going to use that numbering scheme I was talking about. And like the letter A, it's just a dot one. So that upper left-hand corner, that's a letter A. And then the B, it's dots 1 and 2. So I got a little column, kind of like that. And for those who can't see that, I had my hands stacked in a column. For C, it's very much like a hyphen in the way it looks. It's dots 1 and 4. So we're using that upper row, and I got my hands making a row up high. D is 1, 4, 5. And so this looks like the upper corner of our little rectangle of our cell. And it's based off in the upper right-hand corner. So we got a left piece, we got our right corner on the top, and we got a dot just below it in the second column. And E, that is dots 1, 5. And so this looks like a diagonal line headed towards the floor. Let's see, after E comes F, so that one, it's very much like the D, but it's reversed. Now, a lot of blind people who teach this don't like to think in geometry and such. They want you to think in the numbers. But you know what? I'm talking to sighted people. They're going to think in geometry. And I came from there, so I still lean towards that kind of thinking. So in F, it's dots 1, 2, 4. And so we take that little line that we had in the second column and we flip it over to the first column. And we got our dot in that remaining dot is there in the second column at dot 4. So it's the left upper corner of our cell. So far we've used pretty much all the combinations except for 3 more. And this is where it gets kind of interesting because Louis decided to make G all 4 of the upper dots. So 1, 2, 4, 5. And so it's a little block, a little square in the upper part of the cell. So that's a G. Now H, now we're going to start using the lower corners of that little square we just now seen for the first time. It's the upper part of a cell, and this is one of the design choices made in the code, so we could tell where the top and bottom of lines are. We focus a good portion of the high frequency characters in the upper part of that Braille cell. So for H, it's 1, 2, 5. So we are on the lower left corner of our square. Now the I is just a mirror of the E. And this is why E and I get really confused with beginner readers. It's dots 2 and 4. And so it's going up to the heavens. It's going high. So one of the nice ways to remember about E, it's going to earth, and I goes high. That's the easy way to get in your head which way things are going. Because when we're reading Braille, we are going from left to right with our finger. And that's why we get the sense of going down and going up. Because we are literally going from left to right. We hit that high dot, go down for the E to earth. And for the I, when we're running across, we hit that low dot and go up. We're going high. And so that is our 9th character. And so the 10th one is our J, and it's dots 2, 4, and 5. Now we are looking at the lower right corner of that square, that upper square. So that's our first 10 characters. It's pretty straightforward. It takes some time to get in your head. The time comes in getting it under your fingertips, getting good at feeling and determining where those dots are in relations to each other. Because we're only working in like a quarter of an inch of space. I wish I could remember the metric. And I would use my A lady, but I don't want to trip anybody. It's got to be around 4 millimeters or so. 4 or 5 millimeters. Doing it in my head. So there's not a lot of space there. We got to work on that. And so one of the first things when you're starting to learn how to read this stuff is you take one of these. Let me get a demonstration device here. So this is called a slate, and it is a little frame that opens up, and we have lots of little windows that have little bumps on them for us to feel what we put in there called a stylus, and it's basically a blunted poker. And we lay the front part of it over the back plate, and that forms I got little pins that I didn't really describe. There are little pins in each corner of the frame on the bottom plate typically. They are available in styles that have it on the top plate. But the idea is you line up your paper, you get it in a good spot, you take this top part of the slate, and you're literally folding it in half over until it comes in and clamshells onto that paper, and you click it into place and you hear it punch through, and that holds the paper in place. And then we can use a stylus to actually make Braille cells. And our goal when we first start is we're going to be making shapes in these cells. It doesn't matter too much, but I can make shapes in the top row of each cell, and then I can make one in the middle row of each cell, and then the bottom row of each cell, and then I can make like little waves on the next line. So the idea is to get the shapes in there and where the cells are and where the lines are. So you're making a nice set of shapes that you spend time dragging your finger across and going, oh, that's where it is. Learning how to position your finger, because we don't do it on the very tips of our fingers. No, we do it on this little meaty pit between the first knuckle and our tip. That's where we're putting the Braille, right in there, so we get good contact with skin and can see the entire cell with one fingertip. And more advanced readers and stuff will start using more than one finger. And eventually, if you get really good, and I only seen children who grew up on it able to do this. But if there is an adult who learned it, after their 30s and 40s, that can use uh, all 8 fingers, I'd like to hear from you because I would love to know how to do that. I struggle just getting two to work without getting confused. Um, so it's a very physical process, but our goal is to learn those shapes and get them under our fingers. And we we used to call this space visual, visualize it. No, spatialize it. Vision is a spatial skill. We are learning how to see light in a spatial manner and bring things together and get a sense of what's out there in the world. We have the same sense on our skin, spatial. We have a spatial cortex, not a visual cortex. It's unfortunate scientists have named it that, but it's spatial. But anyways, let me get off that rant. So getting back to our alphabet, we've covered the first 10 letters, A through J. Now there is a symbol we can put in front of those letters. Dots 1, 4, sorry, try this again. Dots 1, I keep doing this. Dots 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, it looks like a backwards L when you look at it, visually, and it feels like a backwards L if you understand how English alphabet feels embossed. So when we put that symbol in front of A through J, it changes their meaning. They become numbers, where an A is a 1, B is 2, and C is 3, all the way to J, which is 0. It's our number 10, our 10th letter. It's 0. So that's our digits. So if I was going to write the number 1, 2, 3, I would put that number sign in front of there. Dots 3, 4, 5, 6. Dots 1, dots 1, 2, and dots 1, 4, which is ABC. So knowing my ABCs is how I learn my 1, 2, 3s. And that's one way of getting in your head. And you got to get used to saying, okay, I'm in number mode. And this is where we start reusing codes. We are now giving it a meaning because we saw something before it. And we're still in uncontracted Braille in the Unified English Braille system. However, it's our first example of bringing context into the picture. And it's quite important because we will be doing this a lot as you go further into it. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire system. We'll be here for several hours if I did that. However, I want you to think about what it's like to deal with that kind of thing when you're basically seeing the same shapes and you got to think of them differently each and every time. All right, so the next 10 characters, so remember we're doing these in groups of 10, is the same dots, my ABCs all over again, except I am going to add a dot 3 to each and every one. So K is the first one that we start this group with. So I got a letter A and a dot 3, so it's dots 1, 3. Well, that's K. And L is a B with a dot 3, so 1, 2, 3 dots. So it looks like a little line off on the left-hand side of the cell, a vertical line. And this continues on all the way to T. So, I can definitely go over each and every one of them, but I want to keep this kind of concise. I hope to find a way to make it very accessible version of this available for people to find in the description. But K through T is the next row. And so now our last row for our regular alphabet, we only got 5 left that Louis knew about or cared about. And so we got the U, V, X, Y, and Z. And so those, again, they map back to A, B, C, D, E. But I add dots 3 and 6. So I add the low row on there. And so a U is a dot 1, 3, 6. And, you know, for me, it's just a shape. It's something you get used to just assigning to. But that's kind of the way you do it. That's how I learned Braille, is by seeing this system and just writing it out and saying, this is a K, this is a W. Well, we haven't done W. This is an X, this is a Z, this is an M, this is an O. Now people have mnemonics and out there and whatnot, and I thought the mnemonics were harder to remember than just rote memorization. But go and find them if you want them. So let's talk about W. When it finally came over into English ways of doing that, and we saw everything. Hey, it's a ready-made system. Oh wait, where's the W? So there was quite a bit already formed because we haven't talked about punctuation. Punctuation, like a period, if you remember what the D was, it's dots 1, 4, 5. Oh, we just drop them down a row. Now it's 2, 5, 6. And that is a period. And so we often call that a drop D for shorthand when we're trying to tell somebody what a shape is. We use those 10 letters and just mention where it is in the lower quadrant, the lower cell. And if you think about it, we commonly call it a dot or a decimal. And so there's lots of ways we can think of a period in the terms of a D. And that's how I remember it. It's you know, a period, it's a drop D or a dot. So your exclamation point, the mnemonic that I learned to do was fire, you know, F. So if you take the shape for an F and you drop it down into that lower quadrant, right? Remember what F was? It's 1, 2, 4. So we drop it down. 2, 3, 5 is an exclamation. And then the question mark, and this works for English. There's a common utterance out there for us. Huh? When you didn't understand and you're kind of putting it out there asking a question, it's a dropped H. And if you remember what that one was, right? When you drop it, it's a 2, 3, 6. And that's how you get those basic punctuation. And the comma is a dot 2. I'm not sure why, other than it sort of resembles a comma, but it keeps it off the bottom. But that gets you writing some basic stuff. Now, the thing we haven't talked about is uppercase and lowercase, because everything I gave you is lowercase. If I want to signify something's uppercase, I do in a cell preceding where I'm starting a dot 6. So if I'm going to write, you know, Bill, I'd have a dot 6, B-I-L-L. And that takes a little getting used to. Having a separate sign to say what, when you read print, was a different symbol. It was a completely different symbol. And here we go again, right? A preceding symbol gives us context to modify what comes after. So that's our number 2. So we got a number sign and we got a capital sign. Those two and those little punctuation is really enough to get you through your daily life and labeling things and things. You can communicate with it. It's workable. It's not compact. It's very verbose. It's large. um, so because of that, we continue on and learn more rules and more symbols because we haven't used all 63 of them yet, right? You know, I've only given you not quite 30, but in that area, that's not a lot. You know, I still have a little over 30 to go, and every one of them's used. Every one of them. So that is in a very quick uh, exposure to what Braille is. Now, you know, I showed you this the slate. So one of the things, it's nice to be able to read, but I need to be able to write, right? Literacy is about reading and writing. So as I said, you know, here's a Braille slate. Now I normally would have the hinge on my left. That's how it goes. So this is how I would have it. But I'm holding it up so you can see it in your orientation. And this is a 4-line 28 cell slate. And it has little features on here where I have little marker dots every 5 so I can count the spaces quickly and easily. And I have a dividing line between the 2 that's embossed. And this allows me to easily know where I am between lines. So with these reference marks, I can draw with Braille. I can make Braille drawings. I stop associating, you know, literary meaning, and I use the geometry of Braille to make figures. And this is what people used for 100 years. This is what people used. Recently, we have come up with the full page slate, and it works on the same idea, except we now have like 24 lines. And I think this one's 28. But this one here, it does have the same landmarking, but it doesn't have the lines in between. What we have over on the right hand side is numbers, and they didn't do them as proper numbers, but you get used to that. When space is limited, that number sign goes away. And so you get used to seeing things not quite right. And this is just telling me my row numbers, and it's doing every other. And you can use this to kind of get a sense as to where you are in the page. Use the dots to get on the line. So it's workable, but I must say I have trouble with this guy. I really do. It's easy to get lost. So that is one example. Now I have a portable writing kit I keep in a little Ziploc, and this guy has tools. I use 3x5 index cards. I get the heavy duty or heavyweight ones, so they hold Braille real nice, and that is my form of taking notes. And we use a number of specialized slates. So here's a 3x5 index. I mean, hold it the way it's supposed to you. All right, and it operates in the same way I was showing it. It's a hinge, and it just opens up like this, and there we go. It's same system. All right. And then for those pesky business cards that people like to hand out, although that's not nearly as prevalent these days, um, I have a slate for business cards with a built-in signature guide. And the idea is you place this signature guide in the area you want and you write in the little window. But this is a, let's see, 4 by 12. This allows me to write on business cards to get what they, excuse me, what they are. Let's see, what other goodies do I got here? All right. So here is that blunt poker I was talking about. And this is just one shape and style. It's what they call a saddle style. It looks a lot like a saddle that you would have on a horse or somebody, um, or the Jim pole vault thing. Not the pole vault, the, what the heck they call that thing? The horse that you would jump over. It's sort of like that, but it's dipped for a finger. And you hold it. Now they want you to hold it like that. And guess what? That is very uncomfortable when you're holding it in this little divot here at the very top near the saddle part. I don't know what they were thinking. Um, so I tend to hold it very much like a pencil. And the idea is you get this off your joint. You don't want it in the joint. You want it right here in between your knuckles, uh, between where it joins your hand and that first knuckle as you're going out towards your fingertip. And I'm putting it right in the center. And I use my thumb and the middle finger to hold it in nice steady, get a good grip, and you use it. And a lot of this is where technique comes in. And if you just use your wrist only, you're going to hurt your wrist over time. You want to put a little flex in that wrist, but you actually want to use your weight of your arm to push down. So it takes some time to get good at writing, particularly at speed, which I don't. And that's the point. It won't hurt you until there's a lot of weight behind it. So you put this puppy in your pocket and you bend over, ouch. So this is why it stays in the bag. Now I'm perfect, you never make a mistake. Not. So this here is what's called an eraser. Now it's not the eraser you're used to that is trying to get ink or pencil, graphite off of paper. This is a tool that is shaped very much like a blunt chisel. And I have a very small point here that I use for rubbing out a single dot or two. Or if I made a really big blunder, I got the butt of the chisel that I can rub out the entire cell and do again. So this is an eraser. Let's see, one other useful thing, labeling. So here is some labels. It's, as you can see, it looks a lot like address labels, fanded and such, but its goal is it's thick enough that I can put Braille onto this, and I can get about 20 characters, 3, maybe 4 lines. And it's adhesive, and I can peel it off, slap it on something, and I have Braille label now. So these are some basic tools that I carry with me all the time. Oh, I almost forgot. We haven't talked about um, Braille in the sense that these devices I'm doing put Braille on one side of the page, and I can't use the other side of the page. It's one-sided. So imagine one-sided print all the time. And you know, Braille's already bulky enough, and now I can only use one side of the page. Oh no. So this here is called a Janus slate, named after the Roman god Janice, and it's dual-sided. It's one of the few dual-sided slates out there. And I just put that index card into it. As you see, I pulled it out, and of course, getting it back in is always the tricky part. And I can do 5 lines on one side. This is the 6-line side, and here's the 5-line side. And it has the same markers that I've been talking about that helps me locate where I'm at and dots and such. And if I remember right, it's 19 cells. So 19, 6, and 5 lines. And this allows me to take notes on both sides of a card. And that saves a lot of space. This is called interpoint or interdot, and usually interpoint Braille, where they have arranged it where the dots interleave among each other and don't interfere. And so I'm literally writing Braille in between the blank spaces of Braille. That is how that works. And finally, we're going to go a little high tech on us. Let me put all this stuff away, because I want to be able to find it again. So when writing isn't as important, but we're trying to read a lot of material, and we have access to a computer, a phone, there is library services in many countries that will actually provide large print in Braille to their patrons. And the U.S. has one called the National Library Service. It's part of the U.S. government. And they made a program we're going on about 15 years, not quite 15, called BARD, which is the Braille Audio Reading and something. But BARD, B-A-R-D, is a way of getting that material in electronic form. And when we got what they called e-Braille or electronic Braille, it started opening up the world to make things more compact, faster, and more durable, because the paper is not very durable. So in this last year, it's 2025, all right? In the last couple of years, NLS has been working on a program to bring Braille, the electronic Braille, to its patrons. And they have finally succeeded. It's finally deployed. It took well over a year for it to be fully deployed. They typically like to call them e-readers, but their formal name is Refreshable Braille Display. And so I have one from NLS. There are 2 of them in the US, and this is the Zoom Max version, because I am in Missouri. And I am opening the case now to show what it looks like. It has a mass of buttons and stuff, but the Braille is right here on the lower edge. There are 20 cells, and it can raise and lower pins to form all 63 of those dots. So I can read Braille. Now, I don't necessarily want to go into all the buttons, but the main buttons that you'll find very consistently on other devices, and I got more to show you. So Perkins is a school very famous in the blindness industry, Perkins School of the Blind, and they invented a typewriter for the blind for doing Braille, which I didn't bring that here because it would be heavy to show. But if you imagine a big typewriter, it looks very much like that. And it had buttons like these here on this top row. We got 3, 1 lower down in the middle, and 3 on the right. All right. Well, yeah, I'm getting my hands backwards because this is the left, middle, right. There we go. Now we got it. And these 7 buttons will easily represent Braille. And this is how you can type Braille on a computer now. It's one way. You can use a regular keyboard, but if someone only knew Braille and never had exposure to a keyboard or a typewriter, because typewriters aren't accessible, believe it or not, they are not accessible in any way, shape, or form. They're a print device, and I can press keys all I want. And remember, I'm perfect. I never make a mistake. So you can see why we don't use them. uh, so this is called a, a Perkins uh, keyboard. Perkins keyboard. And this device, I can connect to Bard that I was talking about and download Braille to it through Wi-Fi and read books. So this, if if you know somebody who has a print disability and they have Braille under their fingers, that they understand it to some degree, or they're planning to learn it, get them in contact with their local NLS library and get one of these. They're free to the patrons, and you can use them all you want. And they pair to phones. So now you can read your phone in Braille and type with it. So this is an awesome thing. These things are $1,000 or more. So that is the portable Braille display. So here we have another Braille display. This honker, it's about 1 foot long, 4 inches tall, and a good inch and a quarter thick. And it weighs about 3 pounds. It's very similar. As you can tell, it's got the Perkins keyboard. The dots are a little different. Now this one incorporates 8-dot Braille. So computers, when they came along and we made the electronic version, we realized that computers needed a little more. And so we came up with an 8-dot system for computers. And that's what this one allows us to view and type. There's a row of buttons just below the keyboard, and these are called cursor routing keys. And what it does is they correspond to each one of these Braille cells. I got 40 of them on here. Corresponds to each one. And there are little marks in here that are kind of tough to feel, but they're there. That give you a clue where you are along that line. And right about there is the middle. And if I press that button, it's supposed to tell the application on there to route my cursor to that spot. So it allows for proofreading and editing and moving your cursor to this place that you found an error much easier. So this allows for word processing and such. Where the other one, that one was all about reading. Word processing is not what it's for. It's all for reading. This is a full-fledged device for doing communication. This is an Orbit Reader 40. They go about $1,800 here in the US. They are not cheap, but they are cheaper than the others. The others are 25 or more, 2,500 or more. So that is an example of a 40 cell display. I do not have the 80 cell. I can't afford one. But they do exist. Now, Humanware and APH here in the U.S. came up with another one. We who grew up in computers do not think in Braille. We think in computers, laptops, and the regular QWERTY keyboard. I touch type. I don't need to see it. So this was made for people like me. We read Braille. We may not be the best. Maybe we are. But we actually are on a computer so much that we need a keyboard. And having a regular keyboard and one of those is very bulky and it's difficult. So this marries the two. And it's basically a laptop keyboard with a 40-cell display below it. And it's very nice. I have the routing keys here as well, the cursor routing keys. And reading keys, they call them thumb keys and whatnot for doing reading and such. So it serves the same purposes. But this is basically a keyboard with a Braille display. And that's kind of the quick tour of some of the tech that is available for Braille. I could actually get real Braille, but I don't think it has the impact to show you what real Braille feels like and how heavy it is and such. I actually love hard copy Braille. I love it because I got my hands on it. That spatial awareness, those one lines, trying to figure out where you are in a document is very difficult without special accessibility in your apps, and most of them don't have it. They won't tell you easily where you are in a page. You have to move off the interface and go and find that little spot that says you're at line 30, character 14, whatever it is. And that's very inconvenient. And this is where our accessibility and your accessibility, our needs are the same, but the way we go about it is different. And we need our software out there to be, they have to recognize this and be capable of shifting their user interface to the needs of the user. It's not all visual. Computers, by their definition, have no visual component. We, as a society, have built in a video graphics system so that when you turn it on, we have two things readily there. We have a keyboard and we have video. That was done just to make life easy for the sighted person. But guess what? When computers were first done, they didn't have displays. They had toggle switches that you flipped up and down and all that stuff. They had no keyboards. Sighted people used it and it sucked. Guess what? We're still in that world. And it's not fair. There's no reason for it. Our computers don't have just 256 bytes or 1024 bytes. Don't have 1K. We have gigabytes of memory now. There is no reason for it, except you don't know, you don't understand, and most people don't care. But you need to care. I mean, blindness can be temporary. Hearing loss can be temporary. My broken arm's temporary. Try to type with a broken arm. Try to use a mouse with a hand that has been injured. Very difficult. We need these alternate accesses. And there's no reason to keep reinventing it, which is what happened. Computers in the microcomputer world was coming along just fine. And then the smartphone came along and threw it out all the way. Threw it out. And we get to start over. And then the web came along in that period too. Threw it out. And now they're bolting it back on. We got to put it in at the front. That's how you keep the cost down. But anyway, I'm ranting. But that's Braille. So tell me what you think. I mean, does it seem archaic? Because in a way it is. But we don't have a whole lot of choice right now. I would actually like to show you the refinements to the Braille display. They're called dynamic tactile displays. The graffiti with an eye and the monarch are two of the more famous ones out there that you can easily look at and see demonstrations of. And they have grids of pins that will show any shape and such. And we haven't even talked about embossers. There's one off to my right. And that's another sore spot. Now, embossers are thousands of dollars, but they're equivalent to your printer. I don't have one in my library, and I have to buy mine that is 15 years out of date off of eBay for hundreds of dollars. But it's what I got to do. But why isn't it in my community library? There's two of them here. Why don't one of them have it? There are 3 colleges in my town, all of them with libraries and resources and whatnot. Why is there not one there? And that's the inequality of access that I'm talking about. And those Braille displays, or those tactile displays I was talking about, $15,000, right? I mean, granted, I got that in this room. I got about that much in this room. But you know how long it took me to get this? Um, Basically 20 years. So imagine saving up for 20 years to get a device. You know, your need for it has long elapsed. Now it's just you hope you can still use it. Um, yeah, it's. I just would like to see this stuff mainstream because they're using hardware from stuff that they have pulled out of automatic locks in doors. That's the basis of the systems from those mechanisms. It's kind of interesting. And yeah, replacing your locks is expensive on a door, but it's only because the auto manufacturers have revved up the prices. The parts themselves, they're dollars. Just a handful of dollars. It's the handling of them and programming. That's where the cost comes in. But that that's the quick world of Braille. Let me know what you think about Braille. Have you any experience? Would you like to see more? Um, this is not the only way about communication. American Sign Language, it's a visual one, but there's a tactile version of it that you do in the palm of your hand or on your back for the deaf blind. But it's another alternate way of communication. Closed captioning is another alternate communication. All I'm asking for is we get good at doing alternates. So tell me what you're thinking. Are you for it? Are you against it? I mean, I have been told more than once that having society do all this extra work just for a small portion of the population is, I don't want to pay it. Well, guess what? It's not just for a small part of the population. It's for the whole, because people come and go in disabilities. And it's not small, depending on where you look at the numbers. The World Health Organization acknowledges a 15%. And when you look at 7 billion people, that's over 1 billion people not being served. 1 billion people. Yeah, that's a small population. But it's not that. There's invisible stuff out there, all the color blindness and such. The neurodiversity people who are having print disabilities. We got a generation of people who can't read because they listen to everything in video. It is amazing that I run across 18-year-olds who can't read. There's nothing wrong with them. Their eyes are fine, their brains are fine. They can't read. I want you to think about that. Alternate accesses. We have a print disability forming here in the US, and I think it's worldwide in this latest generation. And I'm very afraid of what they're going to do. So let me know what you think. So until next time, flame away.